Welcome, Mr. Flanders.
Good afternoon, Chair Crafts, Chair Nangle, and members of the committee. My name is Matt Flanders, and I'm the Legislative and Policy Director at Citizens Council for Health Freedom, a national nonprofit health policy organization based in St. Paul, Minnesota. For over 25 years, our mission has been to protect patient and doctor freedom. We often focus on privacy because privacy is the foundation of that freedom. He who holds the data makes the rules. Thus, we are grateful that LD 160 would restore individual and states' rights in Maine. Our organization has long opposed Real ID because it is a federal takeover of state and individual sovereignty by expanding federal government power over our individual lives, including in healthcare. It is a threat to personal privacy, security, and autonomy. As a health policy organization, we are particularly concerned that Real ID cards will be used to track patients as a backdoor national patient ID, and that a Real ID could be required to receive healthcare services. In other words, no card, no care. Additionally, the Association of American Motor Vehicle Administrators have testified to Congress of their plans to digitize the Real ID by putting it on people's phones and having remote access to it. A digital ID creates an ongoing tracking system every time it's used. Furthermore, the Real ID rule requires the collection of biometric information, starting with mapping facial geometry. It permits future mapping of other body parts, all collected and used by the government for control and tracking without our consent. Under the federal law, the Secretary of Homeland Security has unilateral authority to expand required uses of the Real ID and says it does not need to seek congressional approval for expanding those requirements. This could include things like purchasing a gun, voting, receiving medical care, opening up a bank account, and more. Make no mistake, a Real ID is a national ID, and this has been recognized on a bipartisan basis from day one. During the 2005 Senate floor debate, Senator Lamar Alexander called it, quote, a national identification card for the United States of America for the first time in our history, end quote. Likewise, U.S. Senator Patty Murray said Real ID was, quote, never brought before a Senate committee and it was never voted on in the conference. Today, the pressure to force Americans to submit to an unconstitutional violation of their rights is intense. From false assertions that you can't fly to failure to disclose the other 15 TSA acceptable IDs, DHS officials are deceiving Americans to advance the Real ID. The American people are being coerced into getting a Real ID and asked to trade their freedom for a false sense of security. On behalf of our supporters in Maine and nationwide, we ask this committee to support this bill to end Real ID in Maine. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Flanders. Senator Farren.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Flanders, for being here. We heard from the bill sponsor that several other states are working on this legislation to do that. But I just noticed on your a press release from your organization that says Maine would be the first to officially opt out. So I'm just kind of wondering where that stands.
Madam Chair, thank you for the question. There are a variety of states that have introduced legislation to do this, and we know of a couple of other states that are working in the background trying to get bills introduced that would also repeal Real ID. As of right now, as far as I'm aware, Maine is the first to have a hearing, and I expect that with the impending deadline, other legislatures are also feeling the pressure.
Thank you. Representative Albert.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In your opinion, should Maine pass this and other states, that this whole thing is going to end up in the Supreme Court?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Albert. Yes, absolutely. Maine should pass this and other states should pass this to put pressure on the federal government to actually repeal the federal rules and the federal law. The more states that stand together, the harder it is for the Real ID to be implemented and enforced on everyone.
Thank you.
Any additional clarifying questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for being here, Mr. Flanders. Mr.